ecotypes.
Yes. Thank you. And thanks for letting me upload my talk 2 seconds before. Do I just have 15 minutes? Or
Yeah, sure.
We're not running too late?
We're okay.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I won't take too long away from lunch. Hey everyone, I'm so excited to be here. I don't often get to do these like pure science academic things as much these days, so it's really special. So I'm here sort of as a restoration ecologist from a NativeSeed farm, which I'll talk more about in a second. I also want to say I'm really involved with the California Native Grasslands Association. Is anyone a CNGA member here? Okay, just a couple. So we're like the little mini nonprofit that is hyper fixated on native grasslands, and we do a lot of like working with other nonprofits like Galaxy and CMPS, making sure that grasslands stay part of the conversation. So I'm really excited to be.
And you're the new board president.
I am the new board
Congratulations.
president. Wow. Okay, but anyway, I'm not going to talk about CNGA. I am going to talk about our efforts to collect and grow native seed that can assist all of these projects, and how we can collaborate with scientists and practitioners. So Hedgerow Farms is a native seed farm that's located in Winters, right outside Sacramento. Been around for 35 years. It's about 300 acres. We specialize in local ecotypes. So we have multiple ecotypes of different species that we grow. We do custom seed collection, so lots of contracts with federal, state agencies, also nonprofits, and private consulting firms, mitigation firms, etc. We also provide a lot of technical assistance and consultation on seeding projects, but we are not consultants, as I like to remind people when they ask me to do more than I can. Here's a pretty aerial photo of our farm that I took last year. It's always available to all of you to come out and visit, so I'll talk more about that in a moment. We do a lot of switching off between grasses and wildflowers. We spend a lot of time being really careful about our best practices at the farm, not having genetic contamination. So if we're growing, two species or two ecotypes of the same species, we have isolation distances that we work with the California Crop Improvement Association to make sure that we're maintaining. We also, have a lot of fields that attract pollinators, so we're very careful about when and what types of chemicals we apply, fertilizers, etc. And so, it's really fun to come out in July and see all the milkweed and monarchs. I also wanted to say our staff has been working at our farm for pretty much their entire careers. So some of these folks who don't get a lot of credit are some of the best botanists that I know. They work with these plants every single day. They know the differences between subspecies. And I really want to advocate more for letting more people into this conversation, not just the ones with the fancy degrees, but the people who have put the hours and hours and hours in. And they're fun to talk to if you ever come out and visit. So we have about 400 species of native plants that we currently collect or produce at any given time. We do a lot of wildland collections, which I'm going to let Ed talk about more. This is actually a Forest Service project we're doing down south with the Los Angeles National Forest. We have crews that come out and do collections. If it's an ecologically sensitive one, often I come out and help with it. I'm constantly learning from our seed collectors who've been doing this for decades. So how did I end up in this role after my background is in academia and nonprofit work? When I was at UC Davis, I was introduced to Hedgerow Farms as the University of Hedgerow Farms because John Anderson, who founded the farm, he was a veterinarian at UC Davis, but he founded it based on his passion for conservation and wanting to find more plant materials, and bought some property with his family and really started experimenting with growing. Also started the California Native Grasslands Association with some of his friends. So a lot of research and education came out of this place. And so to me, when this position came up to be the restoration ecologist, I thought what a great chance to be kind of bridging the worlds between academia and practitioners and industry and so I found myself working at a private company, which I never thought I would. But I still get to do, research. So I just got to lead like a study and a publication last year. It's not always the same sort of academic standards that would get published in the Journal of Ecology, but we can do these types of field trials that are really relevant to restoration practitioners. This one specifically looked at mowing as a standard for grazing and then controlled burns in our fields and how it affects seed production, and I can share that with you all later if you're interested. Okay, so that's my spiel about Hedgerow. I want to talk a little bit about some changes which some of you guys probably are aware of. So John Edison passed away a few years ago, and before that he sold the company to a larger seed company. So Hedgerow Farms is actually part of a larger seed company that includes another seed farm down in the Santa Barbara Hills, which is called Las Flores, and then 2 distribution centers. So one that's in Tracy, where I was just there yesterday, and then one in Carpinteria. And so we've really scaled up from this passion project to quite an industry. And there's a lot of concern and distrust and burned bridges and things that have gone over the many years of the morphing of all of this industry into something. And so I kind of inherited all of this. And one of the things I did when I got here was just take stock of what do we have native seed wise. So just across California, we have 570 acres in production. We have over 500 species available. In our warehouses, we have 1.7 million pounds of native seed in storage. So people talk a lot about the native seeds shortage. My sort of response to that is always like, well, it depends what species you're talking about, right? Because if it's Bromus carinatus, we've got enough to seed thousands of acres on the drop of a dime. And then one of the things I was really pleased to learn is that for 90% of the seed, we can point on a map to where we originally collected it from. So considering, this is not something that is we've spent a lot of time agonizing over, we're not doing too poorly, I would say, in terms of keeping track of seed origins. Sometimes that's because we're required to by a contract. Sometimes, most of the time, it's just because we want to be able to come back and collect again later. So what does that look like, 1.7 million pounds of seed? It's hard to really even give you a sense of scale, but this is a photo I took on Tuesday in our Carpinteria warehouse. This is our smallest room. So these are all the small collections. So just think of that in terms of scale. Like this is the smallest room with the smallest bags of seed that we have. Okay, so I spent a lot of time thinking about staying local versus scaling up, right? There's all this talk about how we need to scale up the pace and the scale of restoration, but then there's also the talk about the importance of staying local, right? So obviously local ecotypes is something that we are going to talk a lot about this weekend. And local ecotypes require maintaining lots of local connections. You have to be able to talk to land managers all across these different localized areas to know when seeds are ripe and what species are doing. So you can't just have like a big statewide office doing this. You have to go and have these regional groups visiting. And so that's why we have this kind of spread out model where we have multiple locations that all have their own individual sort of identities and communities that they interact with. There's also a lot of local knowledge that you need to maintain. So the CNGA has been hosting a field day at Hedgerow Farms this will be our 18th year. So trying to really keep that going is very important. But there's also many benefits of scaling up. So, restoration projects, like I said, they're increasingly ambitious. They require a high level of coordination, and they benefit from economies of scale. So, as much as it's really important to work with local nurseries and local seed collection efforts, if we want to do things like the Klamath dam removal and reseed those areas, it's going to take economies of scale. And so larger producers are, pretty well suited for the production of local ecotypes because we can share resources like our cleaning equipment, our warehousing, testing. Every single lot that we produce has to be tested every single year. So that's an enormous amount of inventory management and just time and effort. And just managing inventory in general. So if we can combine all our forces and have that done centrally, then that frees us up to actually have the time and the energy to focus on collecting local ecotypes. So that's kind of the idea. Okay, moving on. Fulfillment and planning. And also we have crews that can move around the state as things ripen at different times, which depends on the year, obviously. If it's a wet year or dry year, things are going to be ready at different times. So being more open in our ability to move around is important. So what does that look like? We have lots of different source identified ecotypes of lots of different species, and I could just literally do a presentation where I bring you through hundreds of these, but I'm not going to. I want to talk about, with my limited amount of time left, sorry, skipping some slides here, some considerations for seed mix selection. Because when I'm designing seed mixes, in the fall mostly, or late summer, I'm doing like 10 a day. Like this is happening whether we sort of want to be super careful about it or not. There are people calling us, they want to know how much seed to put on, they want to know what species to put on, and somebody has to do this. And so hopefully it's good people that are listening and trying their best. So I try very, very best to do science-informed guidance for customers. There's a lot of stuff that you all probably don't think about as much, like purity, what types of weed seeds are in it, germination rate, how many pounds, depends on what type of application. I mean, often somebody asks me how much seed do I need to put on the landscape, and it's like, well, are you hydro seeding it, or drill seeding it, or hand seeding it? Another question I get a lot is how many species should need to be in my seed mix? And there's, I think it's really important to have a diverse seed mix, but also density is important. We know for a lot of rare pollinators that there needs to be a certain amount of density of a given species before it's actually going to be valuable habitat for them. So that's kind of a trade-off. You don't want one of everything, right? Something to think about. Okay, this was a butterfly getting to, all right, we're going to skip that. All right, ecotypes. So we're all here to talk about genetics. And this is something that happens all the time. Someone will have some seed mix and they'll say, we're on a limited budget. Which species should we prioritize for the most local ecotypes? And they'll give you some list. They say, we only really have the money for, the fanciest, localist ecotype for a couple of these. And how do you even begin to guide a customer on this, if they're even asking for it? So personally, what I do is I just spend a lot of time talking to all of you. I'm on the California Native Seed Strategy working groups, in which we've been, trying to figure out these seed zones, which Ed mentioned. And so, at the same time that we're sitting there trying to figure this out as fast as we can, every single day I'm getting seed requests with provenance, needs that are just all over the place. Like, literally, sometimes it'll say, we only want coastal counties. Sometimes they'll say, it needs to be 50 miles from the project site. Sometimes it's 5 miles from the project site. Sometimes it's Santa Clara County only, and it's like, okay, but San Mateo is right there. No, we won't take risk. And it's like, okay, you'd rather not have any seed at all than have, a couple miles over. Then sometimes it's, we want seed only collected with the Seeds and Success Protocol, which is a highly intensive, protocol. That's great. But we need to know that early enough so that we have that available. Most of the time, I just get what is an ecotype, right? Most people who are purchasing seed from us are not really even on this level of thinking about this. So that's something to remember. And then on top of that, there is research coming out that ecotype and using the most local species isn't always necessarily the best approach, especially with things like roadsides, road cuts that are just such different microclimates than their surrounding environments. And so this is a colleague of mine, Justin Long, and his students were looking at different Stipropulchra populations and how they performed in restoration. And they found that the closest ecotype didn't necessarily perform the best in some of these. So it's complicated. So I know I only have a couple minutes, but I just wanted to take you through what I have decided is my best approach for this. I talked to Andrea Williams. Does anyone know her? She worked for the CNPS for a long time and is a big person with CNGA. And I just asked her, all right, let's just make a flow chart, something I can go through, and for each species on a seed mix, just what do I need to think about? So the first thing I'll look at for a species is what's its breeding system? Like what's the pollination method? Does the species exhibit, is it wind, animal, self? Does it have any specialist pollinators, specialists or generalists? That's something to also consider. And all of these things are sort of, helping me decide how important the ecotype is in this particular species. One thing that Andrea really pointed me to think about was not the species itself, but the place that the species was going into. So what are the characteristics of the site? What's the population size of the pre-existing population? Is it a tiny little remnant population and you're going to start swamping it with genetics from somewhere else? Or is there a pretty robust population and so maybe it's not as susceptible to that type of gene flooding? Are there selective pressures on that population that are, really affecting this, like high invasive pressure or, grazing, things like that? And then just what other ecotypes are available? So, what are we choosing between? Is it Santa Clara versus San Mateo, or is it Santa Clara versus Los Angeles, right? Like it's you just have to sort of go through every single case has its own trade-offs, and of course ecology is endlessly complex, and so is these types of decisions. But I just wanted to kind of make an appeal to you all that this is happening on a big scale outside of our small, not small, very important, but sort of microcosm of the world. And I think that there is an opportunity for the native seed industry to become a big leader in this stuff, especially as we're having some issues with having our grant funding cut and things like that, because we're going to be doing this no matter what, because we have a diverse range of clients. So if we can find ways to partner when we can partner, and then not when it doesn't make sense, I think that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of good scientists are going to be moving to this type of industry just because of job availability. So we should work together, is my conviction. The end.